Greetings, YouTube. Today we're looking at Hail to the Chin, Further Confessions of a B-Movie Actor by Bruce Campbell. Requiem for Ash edition. So it's got material in here from the television series Ash. Was written along with Craig Osborne, introduced by John Hodgman. Now this is Bruce Campbell's third book. His first book was If Chins Could Kill, Confessions of a B-Movie Actor. The second was Making Love the Bruce Campbell Way. I have not read that one. And then we have this, Hail to the Chin, because, you know, his most prominent facial feature is his rather somewhat stoic chin. And I don't know if any of you folks out there are fans. Maybe you are. Maybe that's why you clicked on this particular video. But Bruce Campbell has been someone I've enjoyed for a very long time in numerous roles that I've seen him in. Of course, the big ones being the character of Ash, as well as his roles as in B movies, and as a pop-up character that just shows up here and there. I think one of my favorite of his films would be Bubba Hotep, where no one could have played that role except Bruce Campbell. If you haven't seen Bubba Hotep, you really need to. But one of the things about this that I really enjoyed, I think almost more than the first book. First book was very much his early life up till his, breakout fame with Ash and such, and Army of Darkness and things like that. And it was very favorable to him. He wrote it himself, and about himself and his career. And while he did talk about the bumps in the road, this was a level of honesty that I don't think was really reflected in the first book. And I think that's partly because he's older. Flat out. As one gets older, one changes the way you see yourself and how you fit in the world. It just does. And if you don't, maybe that's deficit of character in my book. Because he talks about he and his second wife's living in the country, and over the course of living out there were a number of car accidents they got into because of the rural roads and fellow drivers and such. But one of the accidents he got into was flat out his fault because he was drunk. Now, thankfully, he did not hurt anyone other than himself. He drove his vehicle off the road and he hit a tree because the competition between car and tree, the tree always wins, and it did. And he wrecked his car and he wrecked his face and he got arrested. And he actually puts the mugshot in here. He does not hide his failings. And he talks about that in, I think, greater depth than he did in the first book. He also talks about the fact that, he is a user of cannabis, which is a level of honesty I don't think was also reflected in the first book. Not that I say he was lying or hiding anything. But this book covers the television series works he's done, the films he did, a lot of them, direct-to-video or that kind of thing that he did, quite a few of them in European countries. Talked to extensive extensive section talking about working in Bulgaria, which was kind of interesting. The whole post-Soviet environment that he found himself in, where you'd see these huge edifices that were never completed because when the Soviets collapsed, everything collapsed, and the projects that they were building, often just because it kept people busy and because it was giving the kickbacks to the right folks, just dried up and blew away. And they were able to use some of those places as sets for their films. I don't know if they did it legally or not. I think some of this was done guerrilla style. He talks about building an entire stage on his own property, an entire town on his own property, just to do a film, and the headaches and difficulties therein of doing that. He talks about moving back into the LA region because to be an actor, you really need to be right there where you can keep your finger on the pulse of what's going on. And being able to see someone, within a few days in person is much easier when you're in LA than if you're living in Oregon and have to fly to LA. So if you are a Bruce Campbell fan and you have read the first book or you haven't read either of his books that are memoir based, I definitely recommend both If Chins Could Kill and Hail to the Chin. I enjoy the man's work. I think he's a lot of fun. He doesn't take himself overly seriously. His commentary track on Bubba Hotep is a really good example of that. He really, he honestly presents himself as a person that hasn't forgotten how to be a person. And a lot of times, movie stars cease to be people. They become the brand that they were cast into. And Bruce Campbell, in my book, never becomes a brand. He may have a certain niche he fits into very much, and he knows it, and he stays in that because it makes him money. But he's always a person. And I really appreciate that. And it comes through in his films, I think, and his television work. Came through in his roles in the Spider-Man movies with Sam Raimi. And I think it really comes through in his writing. So, if you're a Bruce Campbell fan, I would definitely suggest hunting down a copy of Hail to the Chin.